And I don't know if you're familiar with the setup of the podcast or how this whole thing came about.
I haven't really heard it, to be honest.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where three old friends take a second listen to classic bands' influential albums, track by track. I am J. William Hall. Now, normally we take this journey together, Dan and Rolf and I do, but this is a special episode, another Backtracking.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where three old friends take a second listen to classic bands, influential albums, track by track. They're taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our third season, we selected 15 of our favorite albums that we think deserve a good old-fashioned backtracking. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Raph and JW Dan make this podcast every week. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Get ready for podcast action.
We here at Backtracking are blessed, for we are joined by another guest who will be talking with me, J. William Hall, about one of my picks, a personal top 5 all-time favorite overlooked album. The band is Dumptruck. The album we're going to be focused on is the band's third album, 1987's For the Country. And the man is Seth Tiven, lead singer, songwriter, and one of 2 intertwined guitars all over that 1987 album, For the Country. Seth, welcome to Backtracking, and thank you so much for talking to me about one of my all-time favorite albums, For the Country. Yeah, so are you ready to do this, Seth?
Let's do it.
All right. I wanted to, first of all, maybe just, if you would mind talking about your own background, where are you from, sort of your life up to the time of Dumptruck, what was going on?
Well, I grew up right outside New Haven, Connecticut. And I was involved, when I was in college, I took some time off. I got involved with the local music scene there, and I played in a band. The first real band I played in was called Saucers. And that was when I joined, it was a 3-piece band. It varied between a 3 and 4-piece band. The bass player was this guy, Craig Bell, who had been in Rocket from the Tombs in Cleveland.
Oh, okay.
And the drummer was this guy, Mark Mulcahy, who later went on to start the band Miracle Legion. And we were around, at least I was in the band for maybe about 2.5 years. And then when I went to Wesleyan, well, I graduated from Wesleyan University. I started at Connecticut College. But after I graduated from Wesleyan, I lived in New Haven for about another year. And at that point, Saucers broke up. I wanted to get out of New Haven because I'd lived in that area all my life, and I ended up moving to Boston and, started a band there and everything, but it didn't really go anywhere. And then a friend of mine from New Haven, a guy named Kirk Swan, who had been in a few local bands there, and we got along really well. And we decided to start working on some stuff, some songs and stuff, and that eventually ended up with him moving up to Boston and us forming Dumptruck. And we just, I think probably before we even played live, we went in the studio. We just looked at it like, we want to record some stuff, and if we can play live, that's fine. But right now, let's just record some stuff
And initially, it was kind of like both of you guys were writing your own songs. Did
Pretty
you bring
much,
them?
yeah.
You brought them individually?
We'd individually write songs and bring them to each other and bring them to the band once we got more of a band together. And, maybe we'd suggest a few changes to each other, but pretty much we were individually writing songs. And so we got together with Mark, I'd been in Saucers with, Mark Mulcahy, on drums, and we went in the studio and recorded 6 songs. And the way we did it was I would play bass on Kirk's songs, he'd play bass on my songs. Then we'd overdub a second guitar because we always liked two guitar bands. And and we played out a few times as a three-piece with Mark. And then it was around that time that Mark was starting up Miracle Legion, and he was living in New Haven, and so that was like 2.5 hours away. And it was like, we better get a drummer in Boston.
Yeah.
And so then we got this guy Jim Clements, who had been in a bunch of really cool Boston bands. He's a great drummer, and we did another 6 songs. And initially we were thinking, well, we're just doing demos. But when we got all of it done and mixed and everything, we are just like, fuck it. Let's just put it out ourselves rather than like
Now,
playing a
when
bunch of crappy gigs and trying to get someone else to put it out. Let's just cough up a few bucks and put it out ourselves.
when you say you went into the studio, like what studio was it, or was this kind of more of like a DIY thing, or it was?
It was a really cool 8-track studio in Kenmore Square named Radio Beat. And it was like the name implies, it was an old radio studio that had been converted to a recording studio. Um, and we had this really good engineer. He was like an MIT guy, but really into cool music. His name was Mick Miller, and he engineered and mixed the whole record. And very sadly, like about a couple month or two after we finished the record, he went on a hiking trip in the White Mountains in New Hampshire with a couple of friends, and he didn't make it back.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was, he just, I don't know what happened exactly. I never got a good story, but, uh, he died on that trip. And so that was really sad. But, at that point we had a record done, and, we ended up just saying, fuck it, let's just put it out ourselves.
And so this became D is for Dump Truck.
That was D is for Dumptruck, yeah.
And which label, or did you put it out yourselves, like truly independent, or was it with an indie
Well,
label?
at that point, Mark Mulcahy and this guy, Joe Diaz, um, from this other band in Connecticut. He was in 2 bands. He was in at least 2 bands. He was in this early punk band called No Music, who were just absolutely great. And then he was in this band Lost Generation, which was also great. But he and Mark had sort of started this. It wasn't exactly a label, it was sort of just like a cooperative name. So multiple bands could put things out under one banner and have a little more like attention given to them than if each band had put its stuff out individually. And that was Incus Records. And so we used that label as a name to put out the first record. And then we had a friend of ours who had just started getting into booking because none of us wanted to try booking ourselves. It's a thankless job. And so he booked like this tour up and down the East Coast, like a 3-week tour or something, just down probably as far as the Carolinas, maybe might have even hit Georgia. I don't think so though. And back. And so we sent out, I think we had 1,000 records pressed up, and we probably sent out 150 of them to publications and radio stations and everything. And it just sort of took off from there. I mean, we would play like Maxwell's in Hoboken was always a great place to play, and CB's. And then we got a really nice review from Robert Christgau in the Village Voice. And that kind of enabled us it really helped being able to book some shows. And we just started, we wouldn't do like massive tours, but we'd do like 3 week excursions down to the South, out to the Midwest or something. And just built from there.
And so that was like 83, 84 era. And
Yeah, I
then,
think 83 was when we first started recording it, and I think it came out in 84.
okay. And so what happened between then and the next record, which came out in 86, Positively Dump Truck?
Right. The next record, at that point, there was a couple of labels interested in signing us. Um, and we really had our mind set on doing a record at drive-in studios because we really liked the kind of sounds that were coming out of there
Yeah.
and their sensibilities and stuff.
And that's like early REM and the
Early
DBs and
REM, the whole like, I mean, and even before that, like Sneakers and Chris Stamey and the DBs, we really liked that kind of vibe. Um, and so we got offered enough by Big Time to allow us to go to drive-in studios for I think 2 or 3 weeks and get Don Dixon to produce it.
which
And
he was a hot name at
he was
that
a
time.
hot name back
Yeah.
then. He had co-produced or engineered some of the REM stuff. And he is a really good guy. He was a bit, I don't know, he's probably 5, 10 years older than us, probably five. Um, but he had been around for a while. He knew the ropes. He had a lot of good ideas. Um, and so we did that and we went down there and it was just for one thing we were working with 16 track 2 inch tape rather than like 8 track half-inch tape, which I was what the first album was. Um, and of course there was like it was Mitch Easter's studio. There was all this cool gear there.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. So the
and
jump in fidelity was huge.
Jump in Fidelity and just you know Don Dixon really like opened our eyes to how much I mean we had some idea, oh yeah, you can manipulate stuff, but he was very, very good at manipulating stuff. Um,
Did you
and
guys have a kind of like a set? I know you like the double guitar um, sort of setup. Did you have a particular amp guitar that you were sort of in love with at that time, or maybe still are?
at that point I had moved around. I always gravitated towards Fenders. I think at that album I think I was using actually one of those Son of Boogie amps,
Okay.
which could be really cool if somewhat inconsistent, but I think it might have been on Positively. I think Mitch might have had an AC-30 there. And once I started playing through AC-30s, it was really hard playing through anything else, you
Yeah.
know. But they were pretty unobtainable for a while in the 80s. I mean, they were just hard to come by and they blow up a lot. Now they're everywhere, you know. But
Yeah, well, I mean, now it's with the emulators, and
oh,
a
now
lot of people
yeah.
aren't even, yeah,
Now you
aren't
get
even
a fractal and you can use any amp, so they say.
right. So then you record Positively with Don Dixon. It comes out. It's also a hit, kind of on the college rock
Yeah,
kind of
it
circuit, and there's more touring, I assume, after that.
yeah, there's a bunch more touring. We did some videos. We did a couple of videos for that record because every at that point it was just at the point where it was like, oh, you have to have a video to get on MTV or something. And
Hmm.
actually, the person who directed the first two videos was this woman, Kelly Reichardt. I don't know if you're familiar with her films at all. Um, she's she makes some very cool movies that have gotten a lot of acclaim these days. There was what was it? First Cow was one of them. She just made a movie about it just came out, I don't know, the last bunch of months about an art museum heist. But she makes very slow movies. Much
Okay.
they remind me of like a lot of the 60s experimental movies to some degree, where it's just more about the visuals than any action or trying to like tell some gripping story or something, you know?
That's kind of how the music videos of that era seemed to be, though. It was all about the
Right,
visuals. There wasn't like we're not trying to build a narrative or whatever. Yeah.
right. And which I kind of prefer. I hate those the videos that are like telling a big story and
Right.
it's like a little short movie and I don't know. But anyway, so we did that and then we did our a lot of touring on Positively. I mean, probably a year and a half of pretty solid touring on that record. And went all over the country. We didn't get out of the country at all, but we got all over to the West Coast and everything, which was the first time we had done that. And it was pretty brutal touring. I mean, by the time we got back, I guess in Christmas of or just before Christmas of '86, we got back from that tour and the band pretty much split in half. Or the Kirk and um, the bass player at the time, who was Spike, the friend of mine who was just visiting us,
Okay.
um, they quit the band,
What
and
was it a matter of like just having two principal songwriters? It was just like there wasn't enough room for two guys.
I don't know if it was as much that um, as like our songwriting styles were drifting apart, and our ideas, but not drastically, but. I think it was more just a personal thing. We had spent so much time together in a van with, such a bare bones kind of tour. It was just brutal. It was really brutal. And, I think we just needed away from each other more
Yeah.
than anything else. I mean, we're all still good friends to this day. There may have been a year or something when there was tension and shit, but, you know, I still, like I said, Spike just flew out from the East Coast to visit because, and I still see Kirk anytime I'm in California. So
Yeah. So it's no hard feelings.
I mean, there might have been hard feelings at the time, but there aren't now. You know,
So then, with Kirk and Spike leaving the band, how did you then transition to it's Kevin Salem and Tom Shad?
right. So at that point, it was like we had just gotten a new manager, like probably mid mid '86. We got this new manager. So he, he told us, okay, the label's really into making a new record. And we're like, well, Kirk's left the band and Spike's left the band. And he's like, well, the label's still into doing a new record if you can get a band together. Um, and they're looking to, I think they spent like I think we spent $12,000 recording Positively. And the label now had a distribution, it was this label Big Time, and they now had a distribution deal with RCA. So they had a lot more money to spend. And they were like, well, we want to put some money behind this. We've got a few producers in mind, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like dreading this because I couldn't imagine they'd come up with anyone that I liked. But they were like, well, we've got this guy, Pat Moran, and he's done, I forget who he had done, but it was nothing I was really that interested in. And the other option they gave us is Hugh Jones. And at that point, like he was one of my favorite producers. The Echo and the Bunnymen stuff, the Heaven Up Here, I thought was just an amazing sounding record and really beautifully put together. Um, and so I jumped at that and I was like, Hugh Jones, yeah, let's do that. And
But
but it
so
was like,
then
okay,
he's from Wales, right?
well, he's from London, but he does a lot of it. He did a lot of his stuff at Rockfield in Wales. So
Okay,
that was
so
the plan. It was like, all right, well, you better get a band together. Because at that point it was just me and Sean Devlin, the drummer.
one thing that I noticed is, Positively had a reissue at some point, and there were bonus tracks
That
added
was a
to it.
lot later.
Oh, okay. So this was after the new band came together to do those demos.
That reissue with the bonus tracks didn't happen till I think that was 2003.
Oh, okay.
'Cause-
Yeah, there were demos for a couple of songs that wound up on For the Country, and I didn't
Yes.
know, is that the Positively lineup, or was that already you had switched?
Yes. I think some of it is. I think we demoed some of those songs because at some point we were home and we went into like the small Fort Apache studio in Roxbury and we did a bunch of songs, just like rough versions of stuff. And yeah, that was with Kirk.
Hmm.
Um, but that stuff didn't. Like I say, it didn't come out till 2003.
Right, right.
Um, so at that point, it was like, okay, well, we've got to find a bass player and drummer, and we basically, just the old story ads and want ads in the back of the alt weeklies,
Oh, wow.
and I think we put them in like the Boston Phoenix, and I think we might have put one in the Village Voice because our bass player actually was from New Jersey, and he came up and Tom Shad.
Hmm.
And Kevin was living in Boston. He was from Pennsylvania, but he had been living in Boston for a while, and he fit in really well. And Tom was an amazing bass player. He was like much more schooled bass player than we were used to. I mean, he had. I think he had been to school for the bass, and he just he's a very good player, and he came up with some great parts. And so we
Um,
just worked that together, and then I was like, well, shit, I have to write all the songs for this record, not just half the songs. And so we got it together. I mean, I think it was like, we broke up shortly before Christmas, and then we went over to record the record in April.
oh my. So it was just a few months that the
It
band
was
was
just a few
actually.
months. Yeah, it was like,
Wow.
we got players pretty fast. We had a bunch of people who we tried out, and those guys were like, those are the guys. Um, and so then we just worked up a bunch of songs. I think we probably had like maybe 10 of the songs done before we went to the studio, and the last one or two were finished at the studio.
And was it mostly stuff that you were writing right at that moment, or were these songs that had kind of piled up?
It was probably half and half.
Okay.
Um, some of them had been around maybe 6 months or a year, and some of them were just like, I've got to write some songs now. And
Nothing like a deadline to get the
yes,
juices flowing. Yeah. Um, so did you play live with this lineup prior to going to record the album? Like, had the songs been worked out live?
um, I think we had played live a handful of times. Um, but I don't know how many of those songs we had played out live. Maybe we played out Island. Um, I can't remember really if we had played any of the others out because a
That
lot
must
of
have
them just
been.
got worked up on once we got the new band in place.
Did the band feel sort of like extra pressure, because you were going to record with this legendary producer overseas? Did it feel like, all right, like the pressure's on and here we go and we gotta nail this and be sharp, like coming in to the studio?
You know, I probably should have felt more of the pressure than I did, but we really we really didn't. It was just it was such an amazing experience and you're just like in the middle of it and you're like, okay, I'm like getting flown to London for 6 or 8 weeks and going to record at this studio that like so many amazing people have recorded at, and it's just completely in the middle of nowhere for someone who's used to living in a city. And it's just, it's like a farmhouse in the
Yeah, it's
middle
like
of
a
Wales in a town of
yeah.
like 1,100 people or something.
So it just gives you time to kind of focus and you don't have distractions of any
Yeah, it
kind.
was like no distractions because obviously there's no internet, there's nothing, you have absolutely no distractions. And the only people really we saw were the four of us in the band and the producer and the people who worked at the studio and the people who worked at the bed and breakfast they put us up at. And that was it. It was like all you're doing is working on this record. And we had not really had that kind of like luxury in recording before. And then it was
Did
also like, oh, what gear do you want to use? Oh, okay, we'll rent that. Whatever you want. You give us your wish list of stuff. And it, it was awesome. It was
did
awesome. Huge.
did it live up? I mean, like, working with Hugh Jones, did you feel some sort of awe or kind of like freaking out because he had produced these great records that you liked, or was he easy to work with?
He was amazing. He was just completely down to earth guy, um, but just so on it and so hands on and like he'd do shit like um we cut a few takes of a song, just doing basic tracks, and he'd be like, all right, all right, I got it. Just go and play pool for 45 minutes. And he would be taking like pieces of each take from the 2-inch tape and splicing it all together. And then we'd come back and listen to it and be like, well, fucking hell, that sounds amazing, you know? And we didn't have to think about it, you know? We just have to do our best playing it and not think about the process after that, which is really freeing, you know?
So at this point, Big Time Records was. It sounds like they were treating you right.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
they were doing good at that point. That was that, yeah, they were. I mean, when we toured for like Positively, their press and their publicity department was on it, man. We had like radio interviews, press interviews, product was in the stores, everything. They were totally on it, and they had just gotten all this money from RCA, and they had a big time, hadn't siphoned it all out yet. So it was still
when
available for the record company.
so at what point? I guess it must have been after the record was out then that things kind of went south with Big Time, because it's a famous story now of
Right.
how
It
they had a lawsuit and
it started, um it started actually towards the end of us recording the record. We started seeing signs like people we knew at the label got fired, or got laid off or something. Didn't seem that awful at that point. I think at one point we were supposed to have one of the guys from the label come fly out to the sessions, but that got canceled. Um, so, it wasn't that apparent. It didn't really become apparent until we went on tour to support the record. And then it was very apparent that, like, things were not right at the label.
Mm. Um, the anecdote that I read suggested that they had somehow missed a deadline or something for re-upping your contract, and that some bigger
Yes.
labels then were coming around and making inquiries, and that's what sort of set them off.
Well, yeah, what happened was, like, um, and God, for 30 years old, I was pretty stupid. But we were in the middle of the tour uh, for the country. And it just occurred to me, well, it's been like almost 2 years since we signed. What's going on? I wonder what's going on with our option. Um, and at that point, probably what pointed me to thinking that was like we went on tour, and like how I said, the promotion, the publicity, and everything on the Positively tour were great. And on the for the country tour, it was almost non-existent. It was like maybe we'd be set up to do one or two interviews a week instead of one or two every day. And we'd get to towns and we'd go to an in-store and our record wasn't in the store. All the classic shit. And tour support payments were like coming in late. Stuff like that, where it's like people and friends who worked at the label are getting laid off. So at that point, I was thinking, well, God, our contract's got to almost be up, and I don't think they've picked up our option. So here's where I made my mistake. Okay.
Okay.
So there was this guy, Jim Barber, and Jim Barber had previously been our manager. He was a Harvard student, worked at the Harvard radio station, shit. I mean, he's a really good guy, and yes, I'm friends with him to this day. But he had previously been our manager and then went to work for the label, and we had a new manager now. And but I had been really good friends with Jim before he was our manager. I mean, I'd been friends with him for a couple of years. And I called Jim up and I said, "Hey, Jim, can you find out when our option period is up without telling anyone else at the label?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, no problem, no problem." So the business manager of the label was this guy named Doug Freeman. And Jim's like, "Hey, hey, Doug, when's Dumptruck's option up?" And so long story short, like, I was right. It was up and they had failed to exercise it. But unfortunately, I had just alerted them to that fact.
Mm.
So we get to LA on the tour about a week later, and we're in LA, and at this point, they like owe us several $1,000 in tour support. We have we're in LA, we're going to San Francisco from there and playing San Francisco, and then flying to London for a week of gigs on the airline's dime, and flying back and continuing the tour. I'm just giving you all this to give you context for the situation I was put in.
Yeah.
So we get to the record company's office because we're supposed to go there and sign some stuff and do promo and everything. And I get called into the office of the president of the record label, this guy Fred Bestel. Um, and he sits me down and he's like, "Hey, we've got a little issue here. It looks like we forgot to pick your option up. That's not going to be a problem, is it?" And I'm like, uh, "Fred, we're in the middle of a tour right now that's losing a lot of money. You owe us tour support. Um, this isn't something I can answer right now. I've got to talk to the rest of the band. I've got to talk to our lawyer. I've got to talk to our manager. I can't give you an answer right now." It's like in my head, the answer was, no, it's not a problem. We're not going to be on your label anymore when we finish this tour. But I wanted to finish the tour.
Hmm.
Um, and that was it. Nothing more was said about it. And afterwards, I did call my lawyer, which is what I should have done to fucking begin with. Always call the lawyer first. Always call the lawyer first.
Hard lessons.
And so I told him, what had happened. And he said, well, don't worry about it. Yeah, they missed picking up the option number one. Number two, they have to do it in writing. So even if you had said yes in the office, it doesn't matter because it says in the contract specifically any changes have to be in writing, period. I'm like, fine. So effectively, you are out of your contract if you want to be. And that was that. And we got back. We finished the tour again, like right before Christmas. And, or maybe it was Thanksgiving. I don't know. Sometime towards Christmas, mid-December, Christmas, New Year's, I start hearing rumors that Dumptruck has signed to Phonogram UK. And so,
Which is a major label.
which is a major, major, major label,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I don't know if I called, I don't think we were working with that manager anymore. So I think I called the lawyer and I was like, hey, I'm hearing these rumors. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, I'll check it out. And he, music industry lawyers, they know each other. So he knew someone at Phonogram, and it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this deal with Dump Truck through Big Time. So basically, they were trying to shop us,
Mm.
and you know, their terms for the deal, like it was. I think at the time, Phonogram was offering us like $200,000 advance, but that would include making the whatever the recording costs would be, and they'd expect us to spend a lot of that on recording. And Fred's deal was, okay, you're getting $200,000, I get half, and you guys get the rest. So basically, what it would have meant is, well, we're going to have to spend 100 grand on recording, and we're going to be left with nothing. Because for the country, I mean, they spent like 180 grand on recording that
Oh,
with
wow.
flying us over and everything.
Right.
So I talked to our lawyer. I said, what do we do? And he's like, well, I'll talk to Phonogram and I'll write them a letter and say, we've heard that you're negotiating this deal. Dump Truck would very much like to do the deal with you, but they do not want Big Time involved and they're not under contract to Big Time. And he sent that letter off, and that's what set off the shitstorm because as much as the legal thing was an issue, it also it also made Fred look like a total asshole. Like he's just negotiating this band he has no rights to, which is what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had some negotiations and tried to come up to an agreement that, he'd get something, but he's not getting half. And he was not willing to move much. And finally, we just said, fuck it, you know, we'll do the deal with Phonogram. And Phonogram said, okay, look, send all the paperwork to our New York office, the American Phonogram, and we'll have our lawyers review it and see what we think. We sent it all to them, and they said, yeah, you guys are totally clear. Let's go ahead with the deal. Then Big Time sued us for $5 million and served us with papers on it. They sued Phonogram UK for 10 million, but didn't serve papers on them. Basically saying to them, hey, if you stay out of it, we won't really bother you on this. If you bankroll Dumptruck's response, then we're going to come after you too.
Hmm.
So that just started like a 2.5 year legal battle. And, it ended. There was, we were totally, it was totally, the law was totally on our side. I mean, it was like they forgot to pick up an option. There was no written modification of that. But it took 2.5 years of them just stalling, and it ended finally when they couldn't pay their lawyer anymore. Their lawyer didn't show up for a couple of hearings, and then it was decided default judgment in our favor. But like, I mean, the last conversation I had with Fred was like, look, Fred, we're willing to give you something, but we can't afford to give you half, you know? And he was like, no, we're doing the deal this way. And if it's not, it's going to be a legal shit fight and I'll tie you up for years. And he did.
He was true to his word.
He was true to his word.
I mean, the story is like a worst case scenario for an indie band of that era.
Right.
Like you had this momentum building behind the band. You had just made arguably your greatest work up to that time, and just to do a spiteful lawsuit just to kind of fuck you up and ruin the band, because this lineup of the band could not stay together through that, right?
Right. I mean, we tried, and we played a lot of live shows throughout like 88 and 89 and even 90. And then we finally were like, fuck it. We're gonna record a record, and the lawsuit will be over eventually, and then we'll figure out what to do with the record. And we we had a friend of ours, Adam Lasses, who we had done some demos with when he had a little, an 8-track studio. And he got us some kind of spec deal at this 24-track studio in Philly. So we ended up doing Days of Fear there. And it was probably about 2/3 finished by the time the lawsuit was over.
Okay. And there'd been some, because I think in Days of Fear the lineup is different, right? Kevin Salem's gone at this point.
Kevin's gone at that point. Yeah, it was down. Kevin quit probably in late 88, early 89. And we went through a bunch of different phases with either, we had a couple other guitarists who played with us occasionally, and sometimes we played as a trio. We did a couple gigs. I know there was one radio show we did with Jimmy Ryan from the Blood Oranges playing mandolin instead of a second guitar. And he played a lot on the Days of Fear record too. But yeah, we had some guest players on that record, but I was the only real guitarist on the record.
It felt like Days of Fear was a step more in like folk rock kind of, or some of the instrumentation like was different than For the Country. Seemed definitely like this is a guitar record, But then
Yes.
Days of Fear, like you have a little more of the mando and violin and some of those kind of instruments. So it seemed like the band kind of evolved a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the violin was mostly because I had started dating my first wife at that point. She was a violin player, and it fit in. It's more, it wasn't like a grand plan, but it just
Yeah.
sort of is the way it tended. Although there's some stuff on that record that's as loud and noisy as anything we've done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Kind of embracing both more of a hard rocking and sort of like a flip side folk
yeah,
side of the band. Um, so for me, it's interesting that For the Country is kind of this moment in time. It's like this one lineup of the band that came together just for that one record. You
right,
know, uh, you know, produced by Hugh Jones, and it feels like. And it's the first Dumptruck record that I heard, so obviously I have a soft spot for it that
right.
way. But it's my favorite Dumptruck record as well, and it feels like kind of like a lot of the legacy of the band is tied around that record. Do you agree with that, or do you feel differently about it?
It certainly was like the 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 best recording experience I've had in my life. Being in that situation, making that record, and I kind of like at the time. Uh, I think I had just turned 30. I think I turned 30. I remember the last day of the pre-production rehearsals in London, I turned 30. And when we got out to Wales, it was like, man, this is amazing. And I don't know if I'll ever have this opportunity again, but it's fucking awesome. You
So
know,
you
and
took the
just
time to
like,
appreciate it, yeah,
and just the idea of like, the session players, like, I mean, there was a keyboard player that came in who was this guy, Tommy Ayers, who I think it played with Mad Dog, Joe Cocker and Mad Dog's an Englishman. And these he was amazing. He'd come in like the songs that he's on, like Island or whatever. Basically, he like came in with a little flask of whiskey and like sat down, we'd play him the song, but okay, okay, I got it. And he'd run through and he'd have it in one take. And then he'd be sipping on his whiskey. But man, that guy, and then the pedal steel guy was BJ Cole, who's like an amazing pedal steel player who played with everybody in the 70s,
yeah.
and 80s. And again, he came in like the shit he played on Going Nowhere. I mean, I think that was first take. And watching him do that, my jaw was on the fucking floor.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I think that's what caught my ear. The first thing I remember hearing from Dump Truck was Going Nowhere. There was this great radio station in Pittsburgh back for just a few years in the mid 80s. It was an alternative station called WXXP.
Okay.
And I remember hearing Going Nowhere, and that pedal steel part really jumped out at me because that was pedal steel in general, I think, was kind of an unusual instrument to hear on alternative radio at that
Yes.
time.
Yes.
And so that kind of drew me in, and then just the catchiness, the hook of the song, of the chorus, and that's what sort of led me. I went to the record store, and I think I saw maybe they had like a promo photo of the album cover, and I wanted to ask you about the album cover as well. Who did that? How did that come about? Because I always thought it was just a beautiful picture for the album cover.
That was just a good friend of mine in Boston. He was a really good photographer, and he took a lot of the band photos. And he had just had this print up, and I was like, well, boy, if we're calling the record for the country, that just totally fits the mood of this record.
Yeah, it really does. It really
And
does.
again, it was just really good happenstance, you know?
Well, I had, the record store in my hometown. The guy who ran the record store, I think I got to talking to him, and he was a big Dumptruck fan. And I remember him telling me, I was, 15 years old or whatever at the time, and I remember him being like, "Yeah, the lead guitarist is from Johnstown," which it
Right.
was nearby to where I grew up. And I remember that, like, that fact lodged in my head. And so as I was preparing for this interview, I was looking up, on Discogs, all the, who played on what and everything. And it's like, there it is, Kevin Salem. He's from Johnstown, PA,
Yeah.
like I think that added a little extra something. But, I became a big fan then in the 90s. There were bands, like Tupelo, obviously, and then, Wilco, Sunvolt,
Right.
Scud Mountain Boys, the alt country thing seemed to kind of really like blossom and take flight in the 90s. But you guys were like,
About 7 years too early.
yeah, like maybe even less than that. But when I listen to For the Country in particular, I mean, I can hear Wilco in here. It was like you managed to sort of like span kind of that like the REM legion of bands, jangly guitar bands that kind of like came in the wake of REM, but then you were sort of like giving a hint of what was going to come in the 90s, this alt country thing. And, I think you're sitting at this like perfect crossroads. And that's why it's always so, I've been preaching this album, since I was 15 years old. It felt like something special, and, that's why I wanted to do an episode on this, because I just want to shine a light on it a little bit,
Well, cool. And if there's any like specific questions, about, I know we've veered off and talked a lot more about the band in general than this record,
Yeah.
but if I'm leaving out stuff that you had questions about, or if there's any specific songs you had
Yeah.
questions about or anything.
Well, I was hoping we could kind of run through the track list, just
Sure.
kind of quick hit, and just get your thoughts about I mean, the album I think is an amazing opening song, Island. I think of this as almost. Do you feel like this is like the quintessential Dump Truck song? Like this is the big epic opener?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. And that was always like the record company wanted that to be the single off the record, whereas Going
Mm,
Nowhere ended up. But the reason they wouldn't make that the single was because the first chorus in the song is instrumental.
right.
Okay. And they're like, oh no, you've got to put lyrics on that. You've got to sing the words of it. I'm like, but the words don't make sense coming out of the first verse, and they make sense coming out of the second verse. And so they were just kind of petulant, and they were like, well, if you don't put the chorus for the vocal chorus first, then we're gonna choose something else for a single. And I was like, do what you want. But and like Hugh Jones, that was another thing about Hugh Jones. It's like he was the buffer, and as a producer should be. Like it's that suggestion came to Hugh Jones, and he talked about it. And I told him how I felt. We all felt the same way, and he was like, "All right, don't worry, I'll take care of it." And he was just like, they're not getting,
Yeah.
they're they're not getting it. So
I heard sometime in the late 90s, I was living in Chicago, and I went to see the Pernice Brothers.
okay,
And
yeah,
I was floored when they busted out a cover of Island.
they did a
Um,
cover. I've never heard it, but yes, I know they. I had heard that they did it, but I have not heard it.
I mean, I remember just, because obviously, I mean, they were not, and this was just in a bar, in
Right.
Chicago, and I don't know how many people in the audience knew the song or the origin, but I remember just being like, oh my God, they're playing the Dumptruck song, and that's kind of like one of my favorite concert memories, I didn't know if you knew them or had played with them or something because they were from the Boston area as well.
I know I've met Joe at one point or another, but we didn't know each other well or anything. We
Okay.
definitely crossed paths.
I saw another interview with him not too long ago because I think he had a new record out, and he somehow name checked Dumptruck again. He talked about
Oh,
For the
really?
Country, yeah, and what an amazing album it is. So I'm not the only one out there
Oh, cool.
proselytizing.
Cool.
So now, when you wrote the lyrics for Island, was this sort of I always heard it as kind of like a similar thing to like the Simon and Garfunkel I am a rock, I am an island, but instead of sort of like this defiance, it was more of like an angry rejection of like the world is too much with me kind of thing, and I want you off my island. Like is that where you were coming from with this?
You know, it's hard to put myself back in the mindset where I was in when I was writing it. And a lot of times when I'm writing, I think I'll start from this tiny grain of something for this initial feeling or getting a line, and it may have some like relation to personal experience. Whereas the whole finished product, I don't know if it relates as much to my own it just sort of
Yeah.
takes on a life of it. But it was just like that sentiment of just like, I just don't want to deal with you people,
Yeah.
I'm sure it had something to do with probably, you know, the band splitting up maybe and just like other people in my life, but it was just sort of like probably out of frustration more than anything else.
I hear a lot of the lyrics on this album, as sort of talking about isolation and frustration, disaffection, sort of feelings that I think registered strongly for me at the time because I was a young dude, coming of
Right.
age. And, and I feel like a lot of the lyrics on this album are written from that perspective of kind of a frustrated young man, specifically, life is changing, things are coming at you, and you don't know how to handle it,
Right.
and I think that's, why it impacted me so much because I was definitely that young guy at the time.
Right.
So next song, track 2, 50 Miles. This is like the big rocker on side 1 of the album.
Yes.
This was
Well,
probably a big showstopper live.
yes, yes. And, you know, that started out, that was probably one of the songs that had started out earlier. Um, and it was I wouldn't say it was like about this, but it was sort of like inspired by that story I told you about the engineer from the first record, Mick Miller,
Mm.
like just going and
Oh, okay.
disappearing,
Okay. Yeah.
and it was just like that kind of was like the spark for that song, I'd say,
Okay.
you
Okay. Yeah.
know.
That adds a lot of context. Yeah.
But it doesn't really relate to his situation at all. It's just sort of transposed to something else.
Yeah. Feeling trapped, feeling in trouble, not being able to find help.
Yeah,
Did the coda section of that song when it kind of like there's a great big guitar solo. It sounds like there's some wah wah going on. It's a guitar freak out, and then it comes to a halt, and then it
right,
kicks into the major key. Call it an inspiration coda.
right.
What? How did that come about? Like, how did that come to be sort of like a separate section of the song that ends on a more kind of uplifting kind of feeling?
Um, Well, it was always I was always figuring it would end with that chorus called an inspiration. Um, I think initially when we were first trying it, I was thinking of it in terms of that there was going to be vocals during that kind of rave up section with the guitars, and then kind of worked. It kind of worked better without any vocals. It was like I can't I can't find something that I think fits in there, and I like it with just if we just rave it up with guitars. And I don't know if the whole hard stop into it was Hugh Jones' idea. It might have been because that thing kind of evolved. I know one funny story with that song, which is like, okay, when we were doing the pre-production for the record, like I said, the last day was my 30th birthday. And it was like, the first week of May in '87. And it was a Friday night. We were supposed to play Saturday night and then take the train out to Wales on Sunday. And we went out Friday night, and I got like, we all did, but I got especially shit-faced drunk for my 30th birthday,
As you do. Yeah.
as you do. Um, I woke up Saturday, and it wasn't like I was hungover. I was sick. It turned out I had bronchitis, which I had a tendency to get.
Mm.
Um, but I had like absolutely no voice, completely gone. Had to cancel the gig for that night, and it was like, well, let's see what you're like when you get out to Wales. We'll get you to National Health Service if you need it, which I ended up having to do. So we're doing the basic tracks, and I have almost no voice. I can barely croak anything out for the basic tracks. So when we were working on that song 50 Miles later, my voice had gotten mostly better. But Hugh Jones brings up we're listening to that track, and he brings up my vocal track from the basic sessions with like this very specific echo patch on it. And it sounded exactly like Ian McCulloch. I mean, it was like it was like in the quiet part where the voice comes in and everything's kind of pulled out a bit.
Yeah.
And he pulled this exact Ian McCulloch effect on my voice, and we were all on the floor in the studio listening to it.
So you were a big fan of the Bunnymen, though.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I still am a big fan of the Bunnymen. I mean, I think they had some great. They
I
were actually the first trip I took to England. They were the first, one of the first bands I saw in like
Okay.
1980 or something.
I feel like the guitars on this song in particular, but probably elsewhere on the album, there is quite a bit of like that post punk Will Sargent kind of it's aggressive, but it's wiry and kind of angular, at the same
Yes, the
time.
angular thing I was going to say. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I always liked Will Sargent a lot. I thought he was a very creative guitar player.
Yeah, absolutely. Was that, you know, were you bringing that influence more, and then like Kevin was bringing a different set of influences? Like, because I know on this album, there's a lot of real, authentic sounding country licks and chops and riffs, kind of throughout. Was that both of you, or was that more he was coming with country stuff, or?
You know, he was much more versed than I'd say the some of the countryish like uh stuff, but we both had I probably had a little more of the angular stuff in like stuff I listened to, but there was a lot of similarities, in what we listened to. I mean, he was a really talented guitarist, and he really was. He had the Telecaster thing going. There's
Mm,
some guitarists who it's like they should always play a Telecaster, and they sound great on a Telecaster.
Yeah.
And there's some guitarists who are like, that's not the best guitar for them, you know?
Yeah.
I like an occasional Telecaster for myself, but I'm much more comfortable on a Strat. And it's something about how you approach it to me, you know? I don't know.
So
But
the
yeah,
next,
Kevin totally had the whole like, Neil Young and the countryish stuff down too. He was yeah. He like I remember at one point I think they came out with the little bee bender things you could get, the hip shot bee bender things, not the ones that you had to route out the. Is that a cat?
that is a cat. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I've got 3 of them. They may be around.
I have 6, so.
Okay.
Yeah, he got a bee bender thing, like a hip shot thing he put on his Brit. He loved that thing for the country licks. Me, I'm like, the only gadget I want is a whammy bar, maybe. Anything that's like I've got to think too much about, I don't want to deal with.
Yeah. His playing strikes me as very, maybe more technical at times, like
Absolutely.
more precision,
Yes.
But I think it blends really well, with the sensibility of, I think that combination of the post-punk kind of wiry, angular style
Right.
combined with that kind of a little more technical country licks and stuff. And I just, I think the guitar playing on this album is super tasteful, but varied.
Yes.
There's lots of different styles and lots of different sounds and layers, and everything feels very well placed.
Cool.
It's not
Cool. Yeah.
like lead parts covering up vocals or that kind of thing. But anyway, are you ready to move on to track 3?
Sure.
Okay, Friends. This is probably, if I had to pick my favorite song on the album, this was probably it.
Cool. We still
Yeah.
play that. Yeah,
Great song, means a lot to me. Like, this is the central question of the song. What are friends for anyway? I always heard this as like, you're sick of your friends, like sometimes your friends get on your nerves kind of thing.
Yeah, that, and it's like there's kind of just like a cynical acknowledgement that, yeah, it doesn't matter how good a friend someone is. At some point, they're probably going to disappoint you in some way, and that's just the way it is, because no one is ever going to be exactly 100%.
Right. Nobody's perfect.
Right.
And this song is a real showcase for guitar work, I think. There's a great the guitar solo section in this song where you have a trade-off.
Right.
From I assume is that you and Kevin kind of going back and forth, like you take the first section and then a trade-off
I
to me
think
kind of
if
thing?
I remember right, I think Kevin has the first section and I have the second section.
Yeah, I love that part, and
But
it also feels,
that was something we always tried to do if we could make that work, was like have the trading off guitars.
yeah. Did you bring much, or do you listen to a lot of television?
I love television, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the double guitar thing, was that
Yeah.
sort of directly traceable to the
It certainly had an
Verlaine
influence.
Lloyd?
I mean, yeah, I I was DJing at a radio station at Connecticut College when the first television album came out, and like listened to it when it came out, and I've loved that record and I still think it's one of my all-time favorite records.
Yeah, I agree. Although we're not covering it on this season of Backtracking because I felt like it was already too well
It's
known
established for sure, yes.
The thing that I really like on this album is that from song to song you really change moods.
Yes.
It's never it's never two similar sounding songs back to back. Like,
Yeah, and that was pretty intentional. We always tried to mix it up a little bit, you know?
did you have kind of like a rough track listing sort of going into the studio, or was that something that you pieced together after?
Kind of afterwards, you know, I mean, I don't think we even envisioned like um the crossfade between going nowhere and for the country ahead of time. That was
Mm.
something that like we were mixing it and go, hmm, this would go really nicely into that. You know, it wasn't like this grand planning on that. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. And I assume Hugh Jones was sort of involved in those kind of conversations as well. Was he
Oh,
helping with the mix?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this was in the old days, like I'd never seen how you did a crossfade and they had, you know, they did it at the mastering studio with three tape decks.
Oh, okay.
It's like they print, you know, 30 seconds on each side of the crossfade and do that crossfade live and then splice that into the master tapes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Uh,
Oh,
everything is so much easier now with
yeah, now it's like, oh, oh, okay, is that right? No, okay, control Z, let's try again. Yeah.
no, the next one is Carefree, which I mean this has got the tasty lead guitar lick, you know, for days. Like that,
We
you
used to
know.
call it the leprechaun lick.
Oh, how come?
Because you could
Oh,
picture
yeah.
a little leprechaun bouncing around like
Well, now that you say that, I'll think of it that way. But you know, I always thought that this, you know, this is an example of where it's like the song does have a jauntiness to it, like you know, an upbeat feel. But when you know dig into the lyrics, they're not so upbeat. You know, it's not about.
Well, yeah, you have to if you have something if you got a lick that jolly, you got to drag it down a bit with the lyrics, I think. You know? I mean, otherwise it's like what are you gonna do? Nothing against the song Sugar Sugar, but you know,
Right.
or
That
Yummy
that
Yummy Yummy, but
yeah.
it's
That
not what I
wasn't.
want to do.
Yeah, that wasn't dump truck style. Yeah. Uh, um, one little detail of this that I love is at the end when the song kind of comes to an end, and then there's like this sort of background or backwards guitar going with some strums. There's kind of like a psychedelic little thing, you know, tacked
I
on at
think
the end of
that
the.
was all you, Jones. I wish I
Okay.
could take credit for that, but I think like we just sustained like let things hang and he had this like really cool AMS digital delay unit that you could pull all kinds of algorithms out of. And I think somehow he created most of that little kind of floaty outro thing.
Okay. So then going from that one up tempo rocker, you go into really breezy brush me back.
Yes.
It's all slide guitars and it sounds like, is it like a dobro kind of guitar?
Trying to remember. I think it was, but I'm not absolutely sure. Um, yeah, that was just real laid back, real acousticy, but it's kind of nice having like a song that has a lighter feel on it, you know, not pounding sometimes. I don't know. Seemed to
Yeah.
fit. Seemed to fit
Well,
the mood of the song.
yeah, for sure. And you know, I think that the dynamics of the band, uh, you know, from going from D is for Dump Truck, which was almost all kind of rockers and
Right.
you know, kind of, just to see that evolution over the course of 3 albums, by the time you got here, like that, I mean, this is, some of the guitar work on this song and on the album, it just sounds much more kind of like polished,
Right.
So the next one, at last song on side 1, Hung Out on a Line. This one's got Tommy on the organ.
Yes.
And we're working in waltz time here.
I'm a sucker for waltz time.
Yeah. And that's the first appearance of it on this album. And so
Yes.
I think, again, it's like each song kind of has its own mood, its own particular thing, and that's part of this one. But the other thing that you do on this song that I really like is and throughout the album is a lot of times where the band comes to a complete stop and then just gently comes back in, like, you kind of work those in enough spots to kind of keep the song interesting. And
Right.
That's why it's surprising to me to hear that the band had only been together for such a short time before recording, because it sounds seasoned.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, Tom was just a total pro on bass, and Sean Devlin, our drummer, was, he was a tight drummer. He was really good.
One of the other albums that we're covering this season is one that came out a few years later by do you remember the band Shudder to Think?
Yeah. Were they from Philly?
They were from DC originally, and then they were in New York, but they had a side project. A guy in the band had a side project called Mind Science of the Mind, but somebody who was on that album was Mary Timony, who was in Helium with. Yeah, who Sean played with in Helium. So it's like there are these little connections that were kind of developing over the course of this season of backtracking. So side B, Going Nowhere, the single.
Yes.
And so you said that did you not want this to be the single, or this is just the one that the record company went for because Island, yeah.
I mean, to me, I thought, I always, even by that point, I knew I'm not the person to be choosing singles, because my instincts are probably not right there. They came and they wanted Island to be single, and I was like, oh, I like that idea. So probably it wasn't a good idea, but that didn't work out, and they were like, Going Nowhere. And I was like, well, yeah, that sounds like a good single. And it was like, it was the right time. We didn't have to edit it. And it made sense. Upbeat song.
Was there, did you feel pressure to write sort of like pop songs as best as you could? Like, did you feel like I've got to have something that's going to be a single or a second single?
Not really. It's kind of like, it's not my first instinct, and every once in a while, like I'd say Going Nowhere and maybe Carefree are the more like poppier songs on that record.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I probably reject more poppier songs than other songs that I fuck with. And those two got through. But it wasn't like we didn't have a lot. We were so isolated in Wales, and it wasn't like we had to give them demos before we went over or anything like that. So I didn't really feel a lot of pressure on it.
And you were saying earlier that the whole crossfade into For the Country, that sort of happened.
That sort of happened after, like during the mixing, we started thinking about that, and then it was like, I think what it was we thought about it at mixing, and then Hugh was like, "All right, we'll try it at mastering, see what it sounds like." And so when we went to the mastering, that's when they did that.
Did the band? Because I noticed in this one you have a couple of things where the start stop thing, like in For the Country. there's also kind of an instrumental chorus where you kind of do the thing where the band hits 3 times and then they hit 2 times and then
Two
they hit
times,
three
yes,
times.
yes, yes.
Um,
Mixes up every new drummer we get.
yeah. I mean, was this just something that like just came about organically as you were kind of rehearsing the songs and you were like, you know what, we should try to throw in a little extra something there?
Yeah, I think that was just. I think that I'd actually like. I think I felt like when I was writing the song that it needed something just a little bit out of left field, and that was what I came up with basically.
Mm.
That it would just be really ordinary if it didn't have something like that in there. If that makes
And
sense.
yeah. And how did you had to weird it up a little bit somehow, just
Yes.
to, how did this become the title track of the album, or was it intended to be for all along?
I think it seemed to fit the mood between like um, recording it in Rockfield in this place that's just out in the middle of farmland, and um, and then I had that song name for the country, and then I think it all coalesced when I saw that photo that Ian had done that became the cover, and I was like, oh yeah, that all brings it together. Yeah.
Nice. And so from, that's the one song that I've seen quoted somewhere, where they talk about the whole drifting on an ocean till you die. That's another example where it's like it sounds almost like a beat, sing-songy, but then when you listen
Right.
to it,
Well, that was intentional to have a really nice, joyful melody to go with those lyrics.
I was talking earlier about themes of the album and sort of that disaffection and you know, were you singing about your own situation at that time? Were the lyrics being drawn from what was going on with the record company, with your career, with where you were living? Like,
I sure all of that contributed, yeah.
yeah,
And just like I don't know, just what I was seeing myself doing, what I was seeing friends doing, and the 80s, mid late 80s was not, for some people maybe it was a really optimistic time, but I didn't find the 80s to be that optimistic. I mean, I had a great time in the 80s, but it was sort of like the whole beginning of what has happened to this country now.
right. The Reagan
I
era
mean,
trickle down.
we're at the culmination of Reagan 1980, you
Yeah.
know.
I agree. One thing that occurred to me also, like looking back through lyrics on this, is in some ways some of these sound sort of like Bruce Springsteenian to me.
Really?
A little bit. Like there's something about the perspective that feels like it's coming from a young guy who's struggling, but it feels more like living in a town, as opposed, I mean, I could be wrong on all of this. So, and I'm sure I
Right.
am, but like, I mean, probably because that's what I was doing at the time. I was living in a town and it felt a little more like these lyrics feel more like blue collar lyrics, like not, ivory tower kind of, stuff. And I guess that's what I mean when I say Bruce Springsteen, like it has
Okay.
that kind of like, like the 80s, disaffection with the Reagan era,
Yeah.
presented through the guise of some of these, guitar rock songs that people miss the point of it entirely.
Right.
The next song is probably the most somber on the album, Dead Weight. It's right there in the title.
Yes.
And no drums on this song. This is again just kind of a guitar piece.
Yeah, and I think most of that was cut live. Vocals were probably overdubbed, but I think the guitars were cut live.
Yeah, this is the one that I'm thinking like Springsteen, Nebraska, like that kind of album vibe.
Right.
It has a little bit of that feel to me. Um, I don't know who did the guitar solo on this, but there are some elements of it that I think feel almost like jazzy.
That was probably Kevin then.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's got like a country psychedelic, but with a little bit of a jazz feel to it at times.
Yeah.
Um, and then we're getting to the end of the album, the penultimate track, Wire. Um, Kick ass riff, kick ass. I'm sure this was a big live song as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one we haven't played in a while, actually. Because I just moved to Albuquerque a year and change ago, and
Okay.
but the guitar player I've been playing with for like 30 years, moved here a year before me. So we're slowly reconstituting a version of the band.
Okay. I think I saw on one of your social medias or something that you had a show coming up.
Yeah, and I think 2 weeks from yesterday.
And
Yeah.
is this a four-piece version?
It's actually five. We have a
Okay.
keyboard player,
Oh, nice, nice.
which
Do
is
do
worth.
you do you lean very heavily on For the Country for shows that you do now?
We probably do three or four songs from there.
Okay.
Um, but a bunch of stuff. It varies. The set changes occasionally, so
All right, so the last song on the original run of the album, Barking Up the Wrong Tree, I think this is an amazing closing song for any album. What can you tell me about this song?
that was just sort of an experiment in trying to do things differently. So on that song, I think Kevin and I and probably Tom cut it to a click without the drummer.
Okay.
Um, and then we just had him play basically fills. We'd had him in the studio, but not let him actually. He'd hear some bleed, but he couldn't really hear the track, and we would just point at him and say, "Fill now," and he would play a fill, and that's how that one came. So it was like we want it to be in time, but we want the drums to be kind of random on it.
Yeah, yeah. They kind of slowly make their way into the song.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And and so we
awesome.
did that and kind of then built off that. It was definitely I don't know that it's an approach I'd recommend, but it was fun to do once anyway. And I like how it came out. I don't think it's ever worked out. We can play it live, but it doesn't come it doesn't quite capture it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. This was more of like a studio construction in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the end of the original album, and I know on the reissues of the album that have been out there are additional songs.
Right. Right.
Didn't know and waiting for you. Were
Right.
these songs were part of the original sessions with Hugh Jones?
They were. I don't know. I think all we ever got was rough mixes of those two. I mean, because Hugh was like he very much wanted us to record a couple more songs than we needed, and then when we had everything recorded, it was like pretty unanimous. Okay, let's leave these two because they just don't fit. It wasn't like, oh, these are crappy songs. Maybe they are. I don't know. But
I don't
it
think
was
they
more
are.
like they don't really fit with the others as much as the others fit with the others.
Yeah, I can definitely see where Didn't Know sort of maybe captures the same feel as like Going Nowhere. It has kind of the same or a similar drive to it. Um,
Right.
but Waiting for You, I think, is a really interesting one because it sounds like it's in kind of a funky time signature. It's got sort of like the
It is.
percussion. Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
different than anything else on the album.
Yeah, and but it kind of like I don't know. I think the feeling at the time was like it's too. it's too jarring any place we try and put it. So it breaks up things in a way we don't want. And I'm trying to remember, did we? I think we actually did do that on a record at some point, but I couldn't tell you right now which one it was.
Oh, okay. And of course back then you had physical limitations as well because it had to all fit on
Yes.
22
Yeah.
minutes of vinyl or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
So we've gotten through the album tracks. I guess the only questions I have left for you are about I guess your perception of the legacy of this album. Like when you look back on this album, or if you listen to it, like what do you hear now, or how do you feel about it? How did it impact you and your career?
I mean, I listened to it. When I listen to it, it mostly just brings me back to the experience of making it, which is, like I said, one of the cool experiences I've had. Um, and in terms of like relevance, it definitely, it really primed the way for like really crossing over in some sense, which we were never able to do because of the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying we would have, but there was the opportunity to like go up a tier or two, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time the lawsuit was done, I mean, Nirvana, grunge, all that, and it was really like it would be a few years before the alt country thing really started happening. And I guess I just gave up. I don't know. I was living in Austin at that point. I was married. I was like, you know, I definitely don't want to like be in a van touring the country with no record company support, staying in, four people to a room in a Motel 6. And it's just, I had done that, you
Yeah.
know?
Been there, done that. Yeah.
So I don't know, but
But you continue to put out Dumptruck records
I still,
every,
yes,
yeah.
there've been like, well, there was Days of Fear, which was the one we did in 90 and 91. And then there was Terminal, and that was like 97 or 8. And then there was Lemmings Travel to the Sea in 2000 or something. And then there was a solo record, and then there was Wrecked.
Yeah. Do you have, is there stuff you're working on now? Or are you chipping away at
There,
something?
we did like, I don't know, we did 3 or 4 songs a while ago that we started and are kind of various states of being finished. And right now, it's just been working new people into the band and like trying to find a stable lineup before we even think about recording.
Do you foresee touring again, or do you think that this is going to be more kind of local thing?
You know, Mostly local. Maybe we might do a gig in the Northeast or a string of gigs in the Northeast, but nothing that much. It's just I'm too old for touring. I
I
haven't
hear
I
you.
haven't had like the people who've been doing it for 30, 40 years, God bless them. I don't have it in me.
Yeah.
It's brutal. It's a brutal life.
Well, I'll tell you, if you ever come to Columbus, Ohio, I'll be right up there in the front row.
All right, cool.
Dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the official backtracking interview with Seth Tiven, leader of the legendary band Dumptruck. Talk to us, reach out to us, reach us on the socials. There's Instagram, there's Twitter, there is Spotify. You can send us an email. All of them look for, listen closely, Backtracking Rocks, ROX. That is the handle by which you will find us on the socials. I'm J. William Hall, signing off. Bye-bye.
Deserve a good old-fashioned backtracking. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Raph and JW Dan make this podcast every week. Backtracking is the greatest podcast. Get ready for podcast action.